Welcome to the Silver Screen Podcast. I'm Jared Boomer.
And I'm Katie Gainey West. This is a podcast about movies and pop culture.
And today we are talking about Gladiator 2.
Ooh.
The sequel to Gladiator, which came out quite a while ago. And they have decided now they are making a sequel to Gladiator, which came out just a few weeks ago. So we're excited to talk about this one today, though, on the show. Not very many of the original cast returning for this one. A few members, but mostly a new cast, and led by Paul Mescal, Pedro, Pascal, and Denzel Washington are the main three in this one. So excited to talk about this one. This was one of my most anticipated movies of this year, I think, when I found out they were coming out. So I'm excited to dive into this one.
Me too. And did we actually say the year that the original Gladiator was released? Because I think it was 2000.
Was it? Okay, so it's been almost 25 years.
I'll double check that, but I had looked it up earlier this week. Let's see.
Okay.
Yes, 2000. And Gladiator, this movie was also one of my most anticipated films, but the original Gladiator is one of my favorite movies. I truly think it's a nearly perfect film. So my expectations were pretty low. And I have a lot of thoughts on this one, but ultimately I'll just say up front, it did exceed the expectations I had.
Yeah, I would agree. So I thought it was pretty good. I do have some dislikes with it, but overall I didn't think it was too bad. So
yeah.
So we had news on our last episode, our Wicked episode, a little inside baseball. We're recording both of these on the same day. So no new news has happened since 20 minutes ago when we wrapped up our Wicked episode. But we will go ahead and dive into some of our recommendations on this episode. So what do you have to recommend?
Well, that's a good question. I have been kind of all over the place because I can't even remember the last time we recorded what I had recommended. But this year, Jared kind of joked with me because he was like, how many hundreds of books have you read? And I'm not at 100 people. It's not going to happen anymore. Not at this stage of my life, which is fine. But I have a surprising recommendation that I doubt a lot of people will hear this and go pick this up. But I take a class every fall at UND where Jared and I went to college. And it's like a free class for alumni. And we read Bleak House this year by Charles Dickens. We just finished it last week. And I was shocked. I feel like that's the theme lately because with Wicked, Gladiator 2, and Bleak House, they were things that I thought I just expected to be terrible. I thought Bleak House was one of the best books I've ever read in that community class that I've taken. And I think I've taken 8 or 9 years of it. And we've read Emma, Middlemarch, Ivanhoe, Moby Dick, just to name a few. But I thought Bleak House was fantastic. It's considered to be Charles Dickens' masterpiece. It is an almost 1,000-page book, so it does take you a minute to get through.
Man, they do really like picking long books for this class.
They do. But the other cool thing about this class, I guess the class is a recommendation too, is that the books that typically are picked are books I would never dare to try on my own. And I really like that because then it gives me every week I have to read, a certain amount of pages. It's a certain amount of chapters. Then you dissect it with people. And it's not a lot of extensive writing or anything, but it helps you get through the book and catch more of the book because there's other people adding to the discussion. So anyway, Bleak House by Charles Dickens is crazily enough a recommendation for me. And then just to mention a couple of my favorite books this year, because that's probably an easier way to do this. The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. I read this, I think in October. It's one of my top books of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. I always do an end of the year book list. I wouldn't be surprised if this is in top 10, maybe top 5. So good. Hysterical. It's one of those books that made me laugh out loud, which I think is always fun. And then another one, I think I did mention this on the podcast, but if I didn't, I absolutely have to. Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. I think I did mention it, but that's been one of my favorite books this year. And if people keep up with Goodreads Choice Awards and stuff, both of those books that I just mentioned popped up on those options, like the nominees for Goodreads Choice Awards this year. So those have been two of my favorites. I'm trying to think too if there was. Oh, I also just read The Wedding People. The Wedding People is by Allison. I think it's Espach, Espach. That one just won the Goodreads Choice Award winner for fiction. One of the fiction categories. But the reason I wanted to mention this is because I know Jared and I have both talked about the book Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. There's another book called The Maid by, I think, Nita Prose. And also a man called Uwe. All of those, I can't think of that author now.
Oh,
Uwe.
Frederick
Frederick
Bachman.
Bachman.
Yeah.
All three of those books, The Wedding People made me think of characters and like was written in the style of those three books. Like
Okay.
characters, either like the Eleanor Oliphant, how she was kind of a little quirky and eccentric and stuff. The main character in The Wedding People was just like that. And so if you like any of those three books, I think you would enjoy The Wedding People. And obviously a lot of people liked it because it was the Goodreads Choice Award winner for the year. So those are my, oh, and let me think if there's any TV shows. I, of course, have been keeping up with Real Housewives. I know some of you are like, girl, that's so stupid. But if anyone is wondering what city is the best, or like if you're thinking about dipping your toe into Real Housewives, Salt Lake City cannot be beat. Salt Lake City is on fire. It is crazy. But what's really cool about it, I could not believe this. They have had a situation happen this year with one of the kids in the show. So, like, it's all these women that are unhinged, but they obviously are, a lot of them, most of them are mothers too. And there was a situation that came up with one of the grown kids that had a drug addiction. And they actually filmed a conversation with the mom talking to this son who kind of came out about this drug addiction. And it was incredibly moving. And I wish more reality TV was like that, because it wasn't produced, it wasn't, edited. It wasn't like a let's give this person a drug addiction and then talk about it. But it was a real conversation, and I wish they did more stuff like that. But if you're like, I got to start Housewives, where do I start? Do Salt Lake City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good recommends. So
Thanks.
I have a couple of different things. For a book, I would recommend Hello, Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. I just recently read this one. This is kind of considered like a reimagining of Little Women a little bit. It's about four sisters. And it is really, really good. I liked how it kind of jumped back and forth between the different sisters in the different chapters. So, like, one chapter will focus on one sister, and then you'll switch to a different sister for the next chapter. And they're all going through different things in their life at this same time. You're also, sometimes there's big time jumps in the book, too. Like, you might move ahead a couple of years between chapters, but it all makes sense. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to, but I got it from the library, and I just liked reading this one. So I thought the guy character in the book too, William, was very well written. I really enjoyed his kind of progression throughout the course of the book too. So
I'm so excited to see this. I saw on Goodreads that you were reading this. It's been on my list since it came out, and I already have a copy of it. I was hoping to read it before the end of this year, but I don't know if I will. But I knew it was a reimagining of Little Women, my favorite book.
mhm.
And then, but everyone I've talked to or read their like review of it has given it glowing reviews. So I'm excited and appreciative to hear your feedback on it. So it's definitely on my list, but it might be a 2025 read.
It gives you a lot to think about, and it's also emotional in different ways as well. But really kind of just shows you the progression of somebody, through their life, through these four women's lives that are all sisters. So I enjoyed
Awesome.
it though. I would definitely check that one out again. Hello, Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. For a TV show, I would recommend The Penguin on Max. This is with Colin Farrell playing the Penguin once again, set in the Batman universe. This show is very dark. It's very gritty. It's very crime heavy. If you like that type of thing, I would check this out. It does not really, pull any punches. It's very violent. A lot of language and stuff in it too. Not that much sex. So, if, that concerns you, there's not that much of that in there. But I really enjoyed the story of what they kind of did with the penguin, and how he's trying to kind of become like the new drug overlord in Gotham. And that's kind of the thought of this show. It's 8 episodes, but it's really, really well done. I thought it was way better than it had kind of any right to be. And I really enjoyed it as a TV show that is just a mini series. I don't think they're going to make a second season. But I really liked this kind of 8 episodes of the Penguin, and I like how it's interesting, the story, and how it might lead into the next Batman movie. And Matt Reeves, who obviously directed the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, is an executive producer on this show. And so He's got his hand in this as well. I'd also recommend if you watch it after the end, just about every episode after the credits, there's a little kind of making of that episode featurette. If you keep watching, I found those to be very interesting in terms of them talking about characters' motivations. Some of the actors talked about how they act certain scenes. They'll tell you how they kind of film certain scenes. So that was very intriguing to me. And, that was like 10 minutes at the end of every episode, kind of on what their thoughts were for that particular episode. So, but I really enjoyed The Penguin.
Well, Arjun's been watching that, and I have not watched all the episodes or anything, but like it's very hard for me to walk past the room or whatever and not watch some of the show. And what I've seen has been incredible. And everybody I know that watches it has raved about it as well. And the one thing I couldn't believe was how violent it was.
It's very violent.
I could
Yes.
not believe it. And Christina Miliotti's in that. And I know
She plays, yeah.
she's like a big deal in that. But
Yeah, she plays
it looks
Sophia. She's very good. So, yeah.
yeah. It just looks like it's super well done. And if you guys remember, Jared and I did covered the Batman on the podcast. Really liked that movie. I thought they did a super good job with it. I'll find out what
And
episode that was. That was a while
that was a while
ago.
ago. Yeah, Colin Farrell also unrecognizable in this role as
Yes.
the Penguin. So he's
Incredible.
changed his voice. He's changed his walking style. Obviously, all the prosthetics he's wearing.
Yep.
It's like it's not even the same person.
It was
So it's
episode 141 of the
okay.
podcast. So it was a ways back, but we'd hit our stride at least at that point.
I also really liked watching the Penguin as well, because I thought it was. I want to go back and watch the first Batman movie now and kind of check that out again. So just to see
Yeah.
what's going on with that. So okay, well, I have one other recommend, and that is the movie Conclave with Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci. John Lithgow's in this as well. This is an Oscar contender. I saw this a few weeks ago, and it is about the election of a new pope. So the pope has died, and all the cardinals have to come together to elect a new pope. It's based on a book. I haven't read the book. I thought the movie was very well done. Ray Fiennes is great in this. This is a great thriller. A lot of old people in my screening, but everybody was very respectable and everybody seemed to really enjoy it. I think it's one that could kind of go across different age gaps and things. But if that story interests you, I never knew the process of how they elect a new pope. I don't know, how accurate the book is to the process, but basically they all just get together and they write down who they're going to vote for. And then, whoever gets majority vote wins. But there's a lot of politicking that's going on behind the scenes. And the Cardinals talking about, okay, it seems like these votes for this guy are now going to go to this guy. And so that kind of thing is happening throughout the course of the movie. Just really, really well made and really well done. So.
That sounds super interesting. But okay, you said we have to go to theaters right now to see it,
Yes, it is in
right?
theaters
Okay.
right now. I think it's still in certain theaters. But yes, Conclave, very, very good movie. So. Okay, well, now we'll go ahead and get into our discussion of Gladiator 2. This movie is rated R for strong, bloody violence, released on November 22nd. 2 hours and 28 minutes. IMDb is a 6.9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes critics 71%. Audience 83%. Box office domestically $120 million. And then worldwide $334 million for Gladiator 2. So doing well at the box office.
Yeah, and that was also like 5 days ago or so
Oh,
too. So it might have improved.
I just got the updated numbers actually.
Oh,
So
awesome.
those
Okay,
are,
thank
as
you.
we're
Way to be ahead of
recording.
it.
Yeah, those are the updated numbers. So, the synopsis: after his home is conquered by the tyrannical empires who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced into the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. This is directed by Ridley Scott, who you probably know. He's done tons and tons and tons of movies. Of course, directed the first Gladiator, also known for Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, American Gangster, The Martian, House of Gucci, and many other things too. He's been nominated for the Best Director for The Martian, Black Hawk Down, and the original Gladiator, but he has not won. He's got a lot of projects coming up, which is surprising because he's kind of old. He will direct You Should Be Dancing, Queen and Country, and Dope Thief. So, let's see. Ridley Scott is 87. So,
That's what I was just looking up. That's so funny. Yes, 87. I couldn't believe when I was looking at what he's been nominated for. I knew he hadn't won, but I was surprised by how many movies he wasn't nominated for. He has such a history of popular, really well done films. But he's also done some stinkers. He did Napoleon. There were a couple on there that I was like, oof, that one didn't do well.
Also, there's some complaints that at this point in his career, he's not really like a multiple takes kind of guy. He's kind of just like, let's get this done, knock it out, so I can move on to the next thing. So I'd say if there's one criticism of Ridley Scott, it's maybe that he's not as focused on his craft maybe as he was in his younger career. It doesn't seem like he's taking as much time for some of these movies in terms of filming them and things like that. That's just what actors have said that work with him, is he's kind of like,
Yeah.
a one or two take, set up all the cameras. We'll just do it. We'll see what we get. And then that's kind of what we go with. So
I also never really hear nice. He doesn't sound. I'm not saying people say he's a bad person, but he kind of sounds like a really cranky,
he sounds like he's just,
crotchety kind of dude,
yeah,
kind of
trying to
harsh.
be
Like,
like the most efficient with his time as possible because he's
yeah, and
87 and he's like, okay, get in there, shoot this fight sequence, on to the next thing.
yeah, and not even just that. Like Paul Mescal was doing an interview, and he was saying how nervous he was, like because he's with Ridley Scott and he's with Denzel Washington and all these impressive people, and then he he like said that Ridley Scott said like I don't have time for your moping around. Like it wasn't moping around, but he was just saying like I don't have time for this or you need to get over it. And I don't know. He doesn't sound like the most pleasant person, I guess.
That kind of makes sense. I could kind of see that happening. So, okay, well, that is the director of this movie. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll chat about the cast and our likes and dislikes for Gladiator. Welcome back, and we're talking about Gladiator 2 here on today's show. We've got to start with Paul Mescal for our cast, who plays Lucius.
Thank you so much, Jared. Yes, and Jared, it was funny. Before we started recording, Jared was like, "So, do you need a crush alert for everybody in the cast?" And I was like, "Actually, no, not a single one of these guys is on my list." So, kind of surprising. I know a lot of people are obsessed with Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal. I respect and admiration for these men, but they just aren't my type. So, anyway, Paul Mescal is, of course, playing Lucius in this. He is an Irish actor, best known for the TV series Normal People. Fantastic show. It was on Hulu originally. Movies like After Sun and All of Us Strangers. In 2023, he was nominated for Best Actor in After Sun. Still haven't seen that. I need to. Next up, you can see him in, I couldn't believe this. It says Merrily We Roll Along. I would assume that means the musical that Daniel Radcliffe famously was just in and won a Tony for, and Jonathan Groff. But Merrily We Roll Along, Hamnet, Hamnet, which I've heard of, but I know some people might think I just misspoke, and The History of Sound. He has a long list of upcoming projects. That was just a couple to name a few. Super popular, very in demand actor. And of course, all the Irish actors really kind of blew up last year. It was
Yeah.
like the year of the Irish actor in America.
Do you know about this Merrily We Roll Along movie?
Um,
Because it's directed by Richard Linklater, and
okay, yeah.
it's kind of he's kind of doing the same thing that he's been doing with Boyhood, where he's filming it over so many years. And Beanie
Oh,
Feldstein's
so
in it
it's
as
not
well. Yeah,
so it's not based on the musical because the musical is about a friendship over years, but
it is
it
based on
like
the musical.
oh, okay.
But the movie I think is also being filmed over multiple years. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah,
Up to his old tricks.
apparently two sequences have been shot so far, and they
Okay.
started shooting in late 2021, possibly. So again, it could be a while before that comes out. And I don't know. I
Cool.
mean, that was cool to do with Boyhood, but like,
Yeah, I liked Boyhood.
to make two movies over 30 years seems a little outrageous. So
I mean, I have a lot of things I want to do with my time, so I don't know that that's
yeah,
like
that's a big commitment for those actors too, to like,
yeah.
will we even care about Paul Mescal in 20 years when this comes out? 15
I
years?
mean,
Who
I have a
knows?
feeling we will actually, but
We
that's
probably
just
will.
me.
Yeah.
That is just me. And then Jared, not to divert, but I told you I was going to mention this to you because Jared had not heard this story. But if anybody in the film industry or likes films, if you're listening to this podcast, like me, I love Graham Norton. The Graham Norton Show is so funny. I watch all sorts of snippets and stuff on YouTube. But Saoirse Ronan was on recently. Jared's one of Jared's favorites. And she was on there with Eddie Redmayne, who was talking about The Day of the Jackal, that should have been a recommendation. I am loving that show. It's so good so far. Anyway, The Day of the Jackal, Eddie Redmayne was on that, and then Paul Mescal was on. And they were talking about, I think they were talking about Eddie's training for The Day of the Jackal and like how he could fight off people and objects you could use, like that you would carry around, like keys or something. And he mentioned a phone and like hitting someone in the throat with your phone, like a kind of like a karate chop
Yeah.
situation. And Paul Mescal made a joke about it, and he was like, "I would never think to use my phone," and he was trying to just make light of it, like, you know, make conversation as one would do. And then Saoirse Ronan said. He was like, I would never think about that in that kind of situation. And Saoirse goes, that's what women have to do every day. And the audience, it was such an awkward moment because people like awkwardly laughed. And it's weird because it was especially interesting because Eddie Redmayne is known as like, he's basically like an English Tom Hanks. Like, he is beloved, he is, everybody likes him, they say he's the nicest guy, and Paul Mescal has a good history too.
Reputation too, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just strange that they got schooled by her because it was just a great point of how a lot of things might not seem like a danger, or men in general might be like, oh, that's not a problem for me, I would never have to think that way. But like, women do have to think about that kind of stuff all the time, like opening their car doors, have their key out when they're walking to their car, you know, stuff like that, even in 2024. But it was such an interesting moment, and it was all over like my phone news updates for like the next 2 days because they were talking about that interview. But if anyone's interested, it was still a really good segment. And Saoirse, like, she kind of played it off like she was kind of joking a little bit, but it was an interesting thing to watch. So, okay, I'll move on with the rest of the cast. But I hope you enjoyed that little aside.
Yeah, that was
Next,
interesting. I'll have to go watch that
yeah,
interview. So I'm
definitely.
glad your phone gave you that between the Chris Pratt stories.
I
So
know. Call back to the last episode. um, next up, we have Denzel Washington. He played Macrinus, kind of a cool name. And shout out, he is one of my fellow birthday friends that was born on December 28th. Birthday's coming up. By the way, Jared, did I tell you, because this is since we recorded our last podcast, I did not know this. Seth Meyers and I have the same birthday.
really, that's very
Yes, one of
cool.
my favorite people. I could not believe it. Although he described December 28th as the taint of Christmas. Like, he was like, that was the word he used. He said that he thinks it's a not the best day to have a birthday, which I go back and forth. I just love birthdays. So I get excited, but I think it is so fun when I discover celebrities that have the same birthday. And Dame Maggie Smith also had my birthday. May she rest in peace. But anyway, coming
Nice,
up, happy birthday, Denzel.
awesome.
Uh,
Colin Firth
he
is
is
my birthday buddy.
That's
So
a good one.
yeah,
That's a good
it's
one.
about the only famous person that has a birthday then.
You know,
So
I love a September baby.
yeah,
Um, well, Denzel is best known for Fences, Training Day, Antoine Fisher, The Book of Eli, and for those in my general age group, Remember the Titans. How could we ever forget? He's been nominated for 9 acting Oscars. In 1990, he won Best Supporting Actor for Glory, and in 2002, he won a Best Actor Oscar for Training Day. Next up, you can see him in High and Low. I don't know anything about it,
okay.
but it was listed.
Hmm.
And then the last person we'll highlight is Connie Nielsen. She plays Lucilla. She is a Danish actress, so beautiful. Love her. She originated the role of Lucilla in the original Gladiator, so you would have seen her there. She is also known for Wonder Woman, 1 Hour Photo, and Basic. Next up, she also has a slew of upcoming projects, including Follow Me, Tonight at Noon, and Bird's Eye. And then I definitely want to highlight some of the other people in this film. This movie also stars Pedro Pascal, Joseph Quinn, Tim Nick Innerney, and Alex Kareem and Derek Jacobi. Derek Jacobi, my dad and I went to see this movie together, and we both turned to each other and said, I thought he was dead. And we didn't mean it. We didn't mean it to be rude. We really thought that actor had passed. And it was just so funny that dad and I both had that thought and both turned to each other to say that. And then if anybody thought Tim McInerney, that's such a hard name for me to say. If he looked familiar to you, the thing I knew him from was Notting Hill. He was one of the sweet neighbors, like friends of Hugh Grant in that movie. Anyway, great cast in this film. Joseph Quinn to me was almost unrecognizable. I like double take. I could not believe it with the wig, the eye makeup,
Yeah,
everything.
yep, he was very
Yeah,
good. So
yeah.
we'll move into our likes now. You had that this movie didn't feel like 2.5 hours. I would disagree a little bit.
I knew it. I knew we were going to disagree on this.
I thought this movie
I think we're going to have different
did
scores.
feel a little long in certain parts, but also felt rushed at times, which I'll talk about in my dislikes a little bit. So teaser for moving ahead. But
Oh,
yeah,
excellent.
I thought this movie was a little long in parts, but I'm glad you did not feel that way.
I didn't actually. That was There is definitely critiques that I have about this film, but one thing that surprised me is I felt like the pacing was really good. I felt like there was a really like good action. I it it's one of those, this comes up a lot when we do summer blockbusters where I'm like, well, I got what I asked for. Like I knew what I wanted coming into this film. I do feel like Gladiator delivered that. It was definitely a popcorn movie. It was like a it had action, it had the characters I wanted to see. Like I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I didn't think it felt nearly as long as it was. Also, I had one other crazy thing to mention about the audience that doesn't isn't a like or a dislike, but when I was leaving
People
the
were
theater,
dueling in your theater? Were they like
no,
fighting with swords?
no, I wish. Um, when I was leaving, this guy behind me, I kind of judged him based on the comments he was making to his wife or whoever she was to him. But he was like, "Well, that was a movie that didn't need to be made." Then I look back, this guy had a tripod attached to his phone, had recorded the entire film.
Ooh.
And my dad had even gone in another entrance, like when he had used the restroom and saw him. This guy just like, and didn't even, nobody cared, nobody caught him. And I just have such disrespect for that kind of behavior. That is highly illegal, but it's also like, what's the point? Why are you doing that? Who wants a bootleg copy of a movie you got on an iPhone on a tripod in the theater and then just to make ridiculous comments immediately following the film? It was a bit much. So anyway, that happened. But at least he didn't bother me during the film, which is good.
Well, that's good. You might be on that appearance of that, wherever that got uploaded to. Your head might
Right.
be in the background of the Gladiator filming. So, but yeah, just go watch the movie in theaters. I mean, movie tickets are not that insanely expensive nowadays. I saw people doing that with Wicked too. I saw some videos that people were watching Wicked at home, basically on bootleg copies, and it's like, just go pay the $10 and go see it in the movie theater,
Yeah, and
or
honestly,
wait
no
till it comes
movies
out on streaming.
yeah, no movie's good enough to do that. I don't get it. I don't know. Like either wait or pay the $10 and or if you can't afford that, that's also understandable, but watch a different movie.
Yeah, yep.
I don't know. Weird.
Exactly. Another like for this one is they did a good job with the marketing and that they don't give away the story. Also, we will be getting into the spoilers for Gladiator 2, so just FYI. If you don't want those, turn this off and come back. But basically, you learn that Paul Mescal's character is the son of Russell Crowe from the first Gladiator movie, just older at this point. So they don't really reference that in the marketing. I will say, I don't know if they did an insanely good job of setting that up in the movie. I understood what was going on, but I felt like they kind of skirted around it for a while. It might have been better to just kind of reference that, I think, at the start instead of, I figured it out pretty quickly into the movie, but then they actually give you like the reveal a little bit into the film. But you could kind of you kind of got his motivations, I guess, at that point of why he wanted to be a gladiator.
Yeah. I love this cuz I don't even know that I outright disagree with you, but I just saw it differently. Like I enjoyed the lead up because what I especially appreciated about the marketing is I didn't know who the villain was going to be. And even at the beginning of the film, it wasn't immediately apparent who the villain was going to be or villains. And then, same with whose son he was. He was obviously someone's son, and we knew that was going to probably be a motivator. But I didn't know if he was going to be Maximus's son, like Russell Crowe, or if he was going to be Joaquin Phoenix's son.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were so many possibilities I thought that would be good motivators. So I thought that was a good that to me that was a an advantage of the film. So I thought they did a great job with the marketing. They didn't give it away, and I liked how they arrived at that situation in the film.
Another like is the diversity in the casting. Obviously, you've got lots of different types of people in this movie, lots of different
Hmm.
races and nationalities that are in this film. Of course, Denzel, Pedro, Paul, other characters that are in the movie. The character of Ravi, who is a standout, I think, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
but yeah,
Yes.
good diversity in this one.
That's what I thought too, because I didn't even just mean, skin tone and stuff. It was just interesting to see the groups, like the different accents and things from people.
Hmm.
Like Pedro obviously has an accent. Connie Nielsen has an accent. Derek Jacobi has an accent. Like it was so fun to hear people from different parts of the world. And I don't know much about Rome at that time. Like I know they had to have probably their racial biases as well, but I thought that was really interesting and likely there would have been people from other parts of the world at that time that wanted to be in basically the grandest city in the world.
Um, you also like the beginning credits, which is kind of
Yes.
cool. Yeah.
The very beginning, I thought that was really creative how they did they so when the title popped up for everyone, if you haven't seen it yet, I loved it was kind of like an animation of some sort, but it looked like art. It was beautiful, but it was cool. You would still I think you would still have to know you would definitely have had to see Gladiator 1, like the first one, to understand what was happening in this animation. But it was cool because you know how sometimes movies or TV shows they'll be like, and a recap last time on, and then they'll show what happened on the last episode. They did that with this, and I thought it was really good because it reminded you of some of the characters that are gone. A spoiler for the original Gladiator, but like the people that had died, it showed them dying again. So you kind of remembered them. I thought it was clever. And I really thought the artistry in the credits, whatever kind of I don't even know what medium that would have been, but it was beautiful. It looked like painting.
They were pretty cool to see that on screen. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I feel like for movies like that, it's really good too because they're epics. So some movies like we've completely done away with intermissions, which is interesting, in films. That used to be a big thing, but a lot of times we don't get credits anymore. And so I think with movies like this that are like a big, masterpiece, big franchise, I like that they have the credits.
Another like is the characters of the twins who play the emperors in this movie. They were really good. I got to say, I think Joseph Quinn might have been my standout performance in this movie, just based on how different of a role it was from anything I've seen him in so far. I thought that the twins were great. They were very terrifying. You never really knew what they were going to do next. When the one twin makes his, first in command a monkey, you're like, okay, that's interesting there. And you just, again, it kind of adds to the unhingedness or the unpredictability of this movie. Obviously, Joseph Quinn's character does die in the movie as well. And then the other twin dies as well because Denzel Washington prevails in the end over, I mean, he's kind of got these two under his realm, I guess, if you will, or his rule. He's trying to, get power and take this empire over. So, but I thought the twins were very good, and they were obviously inciting a lot of violence, wanted dangerous things to happen. But I think you need those characters in a movie like this to kind of be like, oh, these are the bad guys for sure.
Yeah, I cannot say enough good things about the twin characters. They were so creepy and unhinged. The other actor I should have mentioned him, Fred. I think it's Heckinger or
Okay.
Heckinger. I wondered why he looked so familiar. He was on the first season of White Lotus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he's pretty young. He was born. I mean, he's right around your age actually, but he was born in '99,
Okay. He's like
so
six
he's
years
not.
younger than me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I was surprised by how young he was, but they freaked me out, their characters. And it's interesting too, because when they mentioned there was some line about his brain like being off or whatever. And I read, so there's one thing I've heard as they've been promoting the film that they've said about what was going on with like his madness, what was causing the madness. But I also had another idea. So Fred was on the Drew Barrymore show and he was talking about his character, like how he was having like mental problems because the Romans were drinking water that had lead in it. That's true, so that could have been something that contributed. I also thought if he was living like a true Roman in that day, he was sleeping around with a bunch of people. And I thought he could have had syphilis because syphilis affects your brain, especially untreated. And they wouldn't have had penicillin yet at that time to fix it. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. And here's where the funny story comes up. So when I was telling Jared, I wanted to mention Run P, the app Run P, and I've been using it, especially for these long movies, because I just feel like if I want to drink water or anything, like I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom if
At
this
some
movie's gonna be
point. Yeah.
longer. Yeah, at some point, even if it's just once, it usually is just once, if at all. Anyway, I had to go to the bathroom. I was looking up times, but my dad had to go, and it was just me and my dad went to the movie, and we had a great time together. But dad got up at one of the points when I said, or I had told him when to go, but he didn't want to go at that time, and he was like, "I can't wait any longer." And I was like, okay. So he was going, and I thought it was going to be a slow moment because Denzel Washington was talking. No, no, sorry, that was when I went. But the twins were like becoming unhinged at this point, and Dad went down, and then the twins were talking to Denzel Washington, and right when he left the theater was when Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. So leave if you want to right now. But one twin murders the other.
Yeah.
And well, Denzel helps. And he left the minute that was happening. And I was like, oh no, this is a major plot development. So sorry. He came back and I was like, Dad, you missed something pivotal. And he's like, no, I was standing in that, the part that you can't see, like the
The
stairs,
little
because he
vestibule
could
thing.
tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could tell something was about to happen. So he stood, watched that, and then went to the bathroom. But it was just so funny. I was like, oh no, we thought he was going to miss no action. And then he missed like like a huge development. Anyway, I thought that was
A
super
big
funny.
plot point.
Um,
That's funny. Yeah.
yeah, but Run P is super helpful if anyone's looking for that. And then sorry, I'll keep moving on with my other feedback. Okay, standout character for me. I really like that you like Joseph Quinn. He was a standout for me, but the character that just blew my mind. Well, there were two. Ravi, the character of Ravi was so good. And that actor is super handsome. And he also, I had never seen him before. I need to find his name so that I can tell everybody, but I don't even have anything to refer. Like, I haven't seen him in anything else. His name is Alexander Kareem.
Okay.
He's super good looking. Again, he looks nothing like that character in the film. They put a lot of like makeup, and I think he had a wig on. Okay, he was born, oh, he's from Sweden, was born in
Ooh.
76, but man, he looks young. Um, anyway, I thought he was a standout. I thought his character reminded me of one of the ones, is it Jimon Hansu? The guy that was in the original Gladiator, and he kind of had a supporting role of sorts. Ravi reminded me of that character.
Yeah, he's kind of like
Um,
a mentor to Paul Mescal in a
Yes,
way. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I love that he even talked about his history with fighting, but he's like, now I heal people. Like that's how I want to live my life. And he got out of that kind of really vicious cycle at the time, which I admired. The other person that blew me away was Pedro Pascal. I know everybody loves him. They call him a zaddy. I get it. People love him. But I haven't really seen Pedro in things. I've known that he's been in some of these, like the Star Wars stuff, but it's not really things I watch. So to see him in something was really fun. And his character, I had a surprising amount of empathy for or sympathy for. So, spoiler, 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 if people are trying to not hear spoilers. Um, he had a relatively short amount of time, like with the audience, but you find out he's married to Connie Nielsen. And then, I originally thought he was going to be the villain, and not even the twins, not Denzel. I thought he was going to be the villain. And of course, he does meet a sad demise. But I understood, I felt with such a short amount of time, they did a fantastic job with making you feel for him and caring about that relationship dynamic between Paul Mescal's character and his. So I thought that was really good. I thought that was good writing. I thought showing that relationship, they did that in a really good way. So that was a standout for me.
I have some more to say about his character and dislikes, not really with his performance, but how his character was used kind of throughout the movie. So, some other likes here: makeup and costumes are great. The music is great as well. Um, really, really well done there. Obviously, Hans Zimmer is not back for this one for the music, but they're still playing off the score of the original Gladiator and using some of those themes and things. And obviously, like for a Roman epic, you're going to have epic music. And that's the case in this movie too. And then all the costumes, like that they use in the battle sequences, and just stuff that they're like Denzel wears a lot of like very showy robes and things throughout the course of the movie, which look really good.
Yeah, yeah. I thought, oh, especially Connie Nielsen's outfit stood out to me. Um, I really liked those because it just looked like they had an insane amount of detail. The makeup was incredible. I mean, the makeup on especially the twins was so creepy because as the movie progressed, they looked more, I don't know, drunk,
More
tired,
like
sick.
unhinged, yeah.
Yes, and that was so good. Those choices were so good. And I know the Romans took some of the stuff like from the Greeks where they would wear eyeliner and things like that, but I thought it looked realistic and was also a good way to just make people as time progressed look like things were affecting them. So I thought that was great. This is not really like a newer original thought, but the music was they kept a lot of the theme from the original Gladiator. And I thought the soundtrack to the original Gladiator is maybe one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a film. I think it's so beautiful. It's such recognizable music too. So I appreciated that. And then I have one final positive, but I want to see, Jared, do you have anything else to mention?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think that's pretty much
Okay.
it. So yeah.
I ultimately was surprised by this. Jared and I also just covered Wicked, and Wicked surprised me in the best way. This didn't surprise me as much, but it did exceed my expectations. I had really low expectations for this one. But ultimately, one of the things I liked, I'm sure some people didn't like this, but I liked that there was a more hopeful ending to this one. I love, again, I mentioned the original Gladiator. I like how that ends. I really do. I think that was realistic. I think it was kind of a necessary ending, but I liked that this one had somewhat more of a optimistic, uplifting ending.
Yeah, it definitely has a positive ending. So now we'll move into dislikes, and I think I was really anticipating this movie a lot, and I think I was kind of let down in this movie and kind of what it did. So I have a couple of things that I would dislike for this one. My main dislike with this film is kind of two things, but they're kind of together. One is I feel like the characters' motivations, I don't know them well enough because it seems like there's not enough time with each character to kind of develop those. So, like in the first one, you have Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix. You very clearly know their motivations, what they're fighting for. And even with the hidden reveal of Paul Mescal being Russell Crowe's son until later in the movie, at the beginning of the movie, you're kind of like, why does he care so much? Like, okay, he's avenging the death of his wife, who we saw on screen for 17 seconds before she dies. That's not really enough for me as a viewer to really care about that very much because I just don't know that character very much. So I struggle with that. I struggle with Pedro Pascal's motivations, obviously kind of wanting to like take over and be like the ultimate ruler, but kind of do it in like a secret way. I just feel like that could have been played out a little bit more. Denzel, I feel like you kind of learn his motivations the most. So I don't really have a ton of complaints there with that. Although a lot of people are talking about his performance being like Oscar worthy. I don't know if it's that good.
I would agree.
Yeah,
Yes, I fully agree with you. People were raving about, they were like, he's the best part of the film
he's
before
just
I
doing
saw it.
Denzel. I mean,
He's
he's
just,
played that
I
role in
mean,
so many other movies.
yeah, and I think he does a good job in this film, and I think he is a great actor. But I didn't feel like I saw something transformative, you know? And if anything, I was much more impressed with like Fred's character or Fred's performance, Joseph Quinn's performance, Pedro Pascal's performance. Like I thought a lot of people were really good outside of Denzel. I think Denzel was a really good villain. I do disagree with you a little on I understood Pedro Pascal's motivations. Like I thought he did a good job and he was a standout for me. But I do agree with you that I think I think this movie is one that you have to see the original. Like you can't go into this one and understand everything,
Mm-hmm.
which I understand why he did it that way. But since that, considering the amount of time that has occurred since when the first one came out and this one, I do think that's more of an ask for the audience. If it was something like, hey, 3 years ago we put out this Marvel movie that relates to this Marvel movie, that's different. But asking for having a 24-year gap in between the two films is asking a lot of people because a lot of people might not have even been alive when the first one came out.
Yeah. Another dislike that I had was I felt like the three main characters did not interact that much, at least in a group of all three of them. Like Pedro, Denzel, and Paul. I don't know if all three of them were even all in the same scene talking to one another at one point. I mean, they're in the same scene, but Denzel might be like up in a box watching this fight or whatever. There's also times when like Denzel and Pedro were on screen together, but they didn't talk to each other. I thought that was weird. I'm like, you have two very good actors here. You think you would give them some dialogue maybe to discuss some things amongst themselves. So, and I think my big dislike with this one is just the fight sequences. I felt like they were not edited very well. They were kind of unbelievable. And this movie feels kind of rushed at times. And I felt like the fight sequences felt rushed and there's not enough time to get it to build tension there or have a big build up. I feel like if we're going to make this 2.5 hour movie, why are we rushing through these fight sequences? And why are these fights between these very important characters so short? Like the fight between Paul and Pedro felt very short and felt like it could have been longer and maybe created some more tension there. Even the final fight between Paul and Denzel felt very short as well. I just felt like that was weird in terms of how they decided to go about with that. I would have probably edited that in a different way because the fights in the original Gladiator feel very tense and very are like very kind of epic and emotional. And these just kind of felt like, oh, okay, well, that's done. Like, on to the next thing, basically.
That's really interesting because I didn't feel that way. Like I
Okay.
just didn't pick up on that, them being short. But it's interesting you mentioned just fighting in general because I did say to my dad, I felt this was a lot more violent than the first one. Like the certain things that happen, like an arm getting cut off, someone getting something shoved into their ear, like that, all of that stuff to me felt much more someone getting, I think, decapitated. We're not really sure. That felt so much more graphically violent to me than the first one. But as far as like the length of the fights, that wasn't something I picked up on. So that's really an interesting thing to hear. And then the only thing I was thinking about when you mentioned the writing or like people being in the same scenes together, the only uh, kind of comment that I have there is the screenwriters, I don't think they would have known, at the time they're not going to know who's going to be acting. So I definitely think I agree with you that it would be great to see Pedro, Denzel, some of these people interact and have dialogue together. But I don't know that just from the perspective of like the order of how these things were done, it's not like the screenwriters would have known these are going to be the people. Let's give them dialogue. But that's a really interesting point. But I felt like I understood the motivations of most of the people. But I am in agreement with you. Oh, Jared, you made me think of one other thing that was one of my dislikes with the fights. So the Colosseum, I knew this about Rome. They actually would flood the Colosseum to have some of these games, like to have water games and stuff like that. So that was accurate. But when the sharks showed
That
up, I
sequence was
was like,
outrageous.
that was outrageous. That 100% took me out of the film. I rolled my eyes. Like I thought it was funny almost, and like this is not a funny movie. So the shark thing I thought was utterly ridiculous, and I don't really know why. Like, you already have people slitting each other's throats, cutting heads off, like all this other stuff. I don't know that you needed a vicious shark. We already have plenty of bloody options here and ways for people to die. So the shark was just that was ridiculous. Sharks, that was dumb.
Yeah, that was another one of my big dislikes with the fight sequences is that felt just very stupid and totally out of place for this particular movie. I get why you do it. You want to create a spectacle, but still, like, you don't need it in this movie. Just do
Yeah,
more like hand-to-hand fighting, combat fights, sword fights, whatever. I mean, this is Gladiator. Why are we
right.
fighting on boats with sharks in the water? I mean, that's
And
just kind of weird.
And then I had two other things that are not huge, but I did want to mention for dislikes. This doesn't super matter. But if somebody is going to a film for historical accuracy, like this is not it. And Gladiator was never meant to be that. This was not a film made about like the history of the Romans, really. But if that's what you're going for, this is not going to be historically accurate in any way. Some of the characters were real people, but like Marcus Aurelius and stuff. But yeah, and then the other thing, I personally, so I don't know how to describe this other than like a surreal moment. In the original Gladiator, you see Maximus's character like goes to see his dead wife and his son. Like there's kind of like this surreal, it's like he's in another world, like a
It's like
dream
a dream.
state or
Yeah,
something.
yep.
Yeah. I did not like how they showed that in this film. That bothered me. I don't think bothers the right word. I just didn't like the camera work and stuff. I didn't like something about how it looked when Paul Mescal's character was having those like interludes, if you will. So that was a dislike for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And then my only other final little dislike was I thought the fight sequences weren't edited particularly well either. I was kind of talking about that a little bit, but excuse me. There was the fight sequence between Pedro and Paul when they're like fighting, and then they cut back to shots of like Denzel in the box and like Connie's character, and I'm like, I don't need to see that right now. Like, why are you like?
Yeah.
There's so much action going on. Why are you cutting away from that? Why are you not showing us that on screen? Again, trying to create that tension, trying to create the feelings for some of these characters. Ultimately, I just didn't really care if these characters lived or died in this movie. I mean, I didn't care if Pedro died. I didn't really care if Paul lived. I mean, I felt like that movie just did a bad job of making me care about the characters and kind of giving them enough backstory. And I think that was due maybe to the fact that there's maybe too many characters in this movie and everything is kind of like you have 7 minutes with this character and then on to the next one. I feel like if you cut some of those storylines out, maybe you can kind of expand the story a little bit. I mean, in the first Gladiator, it's really just between Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix. So maybe you have that situation here, but you know, or you could have done that. But what you've got in this movie is like three that you're really focusing on, and then some other side characters as well that you need to get in. So I thought that was all just a lot for this movie. that felt rushed, but I also didn't feel like did a ton with the story either. So
Yeah, I will say I didn't feel particularly invested in a lot of the characters. I also didn't care if Paul Mescal's character lived or died, but that's mainly because I feel like it's a realistic outcome if a gladiator dies. But the one character I was really sad about his death was Pedro Pascal's character. And the one character that didn't die that I was really happy about was Ravi. I did not want anything to happen to him. I felt like he wasn't important enough per se to be killed. And that would have really bummed me out. And I don't know that his death would have been um, reasonable, or like I don't know why they would have done that. So I was happy he didn't die, but I was really sad Pedro died. But ultimately, this film um, was better than I expected. I don't know that I thought it needed to be made, but I do think as far as carrying on the story, I liked it. But it wasn't a standout film for me this year. So I would watch it again because I love the story of Gladiator. I did think it was very entertaining, but not my favorite film. I do have my score. Did you want me to go
yeah,
first?
you can go ahead and go first.
Okay, not best movie of the year, but I did enjoy it. I am actually going to give this a 72.
Okay.
I thought it was good, not great, but it was fine.
Like I said, I think I had more dislikes about it than you. It was pretty disappointing to me because I was very excited to see it, and I just felt like it
Yeah.
didn't really deliver. And I would just watch the first Gladiator again because, again, that's such a great movie. So
Yes.
I'm going to give this one a 58 out of 100.
Okay.
Again,
Okay.
some good performances in parts, some things I did like about the movie, but overall, I just felt like it was kind of disjointed and all over the place, and just didn't really work for me. So.
I hear you. I think that's fair.
So that's our thoughts on Gladiator. You can follow the show at Podcast Silver on Instagram. Also, search us on Facebook. We're going to have a break, obviously, before we do some more episodes, but we do plan on covering Nosferatu, which I'm actually very excited for. That looks very creepy and should be pretty good.
I know it is so not a Christmas Day movie to me, but I am really excited for it. But I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. But I can't remember the last time this many people were so excited for a film.
Yeah, so we're going to cover that, and we're also going to cover A Complete Unknown, which is the new Timothée Chalamet movie, where he plays Bob Dylan. So those will be our next couple of episodes here on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jared. Thanks for the reminder, and we appreciate you all listening. We can't wait to keep coming back. Please continue to listen to the podcast and share it with your friends. Until next time, we'd like to thank the Academy.